President Trump tends to stick to his positions and, well, he's not afraid to repeat them.
100%. We're going to build the wall. Believe me, we're going to build the wall. We will build the wall. We will build a great wall along the southern border.
And his views on the UK and who runs it have been pretty well aired before. Ending his last visit, he was full of praise for one woman.
We have a great relationship with your Prime Minister. We met with the Queen.
Did you get the feeling she liked you?
Well, I don't want to speak for her, but I can tell you I liked her. So usually that helps, but I liked her a lot.
Yes, it's meeting the Queen that generates real excitement for the president, so much so that he's bringing the family over next week to do so. Theresa May, on the other hand, he's publicly accused of mishandling Brexit and privately incited her to take drastic action.
He told me I should sue the EU.
Sue the EU?
Sue the EU. Not go into negotiations, sue them. Actually, no.
Will the president be able to resist an I told you so moment with Theresa May about the failure of her deal? Downing Street would be wise to equip her with a ready riposte. Of course, underlying his ideas on Brexit are his trade-based view of international relations and the sense that the European Union is a foe.
I think we have a lot of foes. I think the European Union is a foe, what they do to us in trade. Now, you wouldn't think of the European Union, but they're a foe.
In the case of China, the Trump view is even more adversarial. Will he echo recent remarks by the Secretary of State, critical of the UK for planning to buy parts of its 5G network from China's Huawei? Certainly the president's view is that Huawei is part of the bigger trade struggle, and his accusation is that Beijing is stealing our jobs.
So I just announced that we'll increase tariffs on China. And we won't back down until China stops cheating our workers and stealing our jobs. And that's what's going to happen.
And one final area for potential embarrassment, it's quite likely that the president will use the visit to bolster those he feels take the hardest line on Brexit, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, men who he describes as big powers.
Nigel Farage is a friend of mine. Boris is a friend of mine. They're two very good guys, very interesting people. Nigel's had a big victory. He's picked up 32% of the vote, starting from nothing. And I think they're big powers over there. I think they've done a good job.
Number 10 will be hoping that any meeting with those two prominent Brexiteers will be private and that echoes of earlier foreign trips, the mischievous remarks will have been made before he lands in the UK.
Downing Street will be hoping that the visit will be defined not by the words of a president getting into pre-election mode, but by images of the state banquet at Buckingham Palace and of the D-Day commemorations, pictures that will tell the story of the bond between the two countries. This afternoon, the president's helicopters were practicing over central London. The visit itself starts in 3 days.
Mark Urban, so how should Theresa May and indeed Boris Johnson play this state visit? And where will the UK-US relationship be by this time next week? Here to discuss that are author and journalist Lionel Shriver, former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan, and Sarah Elliot, the chairwoman of Republican Overseas UK. Good evening to all of you. Just want to kick off with this great scoop by The Sun. Some of the most spellbinding stuff. I back Boris. I can help anyone if I endorse them. Apparently he's been asked, he says, to endorse Jeremy Hunt's asked for endorsement. He says Theresa May has screwed up the Brexit negotiations. She handed the EU all the cards. He says that Boris Johnson's extramarital affairs will do him no harm. He says that he was shocked by Meghan Markle being nasty about him, and apparently that was a good couple of years ago, so he certainly hangs on to things. So let's just go straight away and say, first of all, a good idea or not, John McTernan, for an American president on the eve of his first state visit to come in the middle of chaos in the UK and back a single contender?
A terribly bad idea for him, completely characteristic of the man, and it makes you certain that John Bercow was right as Speaker to say this man's not coming anywhere near the House of Commons. This is going to be trying to be boxed off by the government and by Buckingham Palace as that state visits, and sort of be the formal events. But it's what we would have expected. It's kind of more wide-ranging in a way. And what are Boris's camp thinking about today? Thinking, is it good that he's backed him, or is it bad? I think.
Well, I wonder if he'll think it's good. I mean, because now we know that whether or not he's going to meet Boris and Farage, well, presumably Nigel Farage is not going to want to meet him so much now.
Exactly.
The question is, will Boris want to meet him or not? Or is this actually just so much of an embarrassment that Boris might think it would embarrassment? It would be water off Boris's back.
I think it's water off Boris's back because Boris is being very careful not to talk much during this the nomination campaign, and I think Boris knows if he speaks and says the wrong thing, he might lose the nomination. In this case, everybody else talks about Boris, so he gets talked about without having to speak himself. It's almost perfect for him.
Now, Sarah Elliot, it would be fair to say you were looking forward to the state visit, but I wonder what you make of this.
Well, I think it's very much in Trump's character to do something like this. I think the last time we were together, Kirsty, there was another Sun interview. I think this is Trump being assertive, taking the lead of the trip, making sure that he gets his say in. I'm not sure it's really, I agree with John. I don't think it's actually appropriate for foreign leaders to intervene in other countries' elections. President Barack Obama said that the UK is going to be at the back of the queue if they vote for Brexit. That actually helped the Leave campaign. I don't think this is going to play out very well. However, I think it may actually be very popular with Boris supporters.
Well, Lionel Shriver is someone who is a proud Brexiteer, but not a Trump supporter. Backing Boris, the Brexiteer, Boris who says that he would like to leave the deal, but doesn't mind if he doesn't leave the deal. How do you think this plays for Trump?
Well, I'm not sure it plays that well for Boris. If Trump got on TV and talked about Lionel Shriver as one of my best friends, I'd never live it down.
Yeah. You don't think that Boris Johnson actually wants this adulation?
Well, it's hard to turn. It's flattering, but I'm not sure that it's in the big political calculus. It helps him with the people that he needs to be helped with, and I certainly concur with my panelists that. This is not what an American president should be doing. And I felt the same way about Obama's butting his nose into British business. And I think that it may be worth looking at the paradigm and flipping it, because there are going to be a lot of protests this week. Countries and their people do not like to be told what to do by other countries, leaders, or people. And so it often backfires.
So we were expecting a slap over the wrists for any truck with Huawei.
Yep.
We were expecting a bid on Brexit. But this combined with this, what I would see actually as quite a humiliating thing for him to say to Theresa May, who's already down but not out. What is her best way of dealing with this?
I think her best way is to be dignified, to be elevated, to make a state visit, head of government to head of state, and to, I think, push back strongly in private. Theresa May has got very strong views on defence, very strong views on security, and I expect her to tell Donald Trump in no uncertain terms, our security services have told us that Huawei is not a risk for us. I'm taking the advice of my security services. I'm not going to do what you tell me to do.
But he's already sent, as it were, his attack dog John Bolton out already on Huawei, but also on John Bolton saying very clearly tonight, I think he spoke this morning, but he also did an interview tonight, in which he said that, yes, well, Brexit was very good because we should distance ourselves, it's better to distance ourselves from the EU and be much more transatlantic as far as NATO's commitment is concerned, because that shows that we're much more in line with the Americans on NATO. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's wonderful to be more aligned with the United States. And
would you accept that Donald Trump is, hugely populist, anti-EU?
Yeah, I think he is, because he likes the sovereignness of the nation state. I mean, they want to separate from I think Donald Trump wants a free trade agreement with the United States. He would like...
With the United Kingdom?
Yes.
Yes.
But
he's going to drive a hard bargain, isn't he? He's going to drive a hard bargain with the UK, and at the moment he thinks that we're actually in a weak position.
I think, but it's also resetting Brexit, So now that Theresa May is on the out, the UK can once again think about what their global Britain relationship will look like, what their relationship with the US will look like. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity actually for both nations to really rethink a free trade agreement, rethink about how you negotiate with the EU. I think the White House has been very frustrated with the way Theresa May has negotiated with the EU and how she's run her government. I know that he did feel very much insulted by the protests last time because he felt Theresa May did not have control of her own country. I think the Sun interview was retribution on that. And I think he is now putting himself forward as the boss of this trip. And he's also
as the boss of the world.
And he's saying to Boris Johnson, who also wants a free trading agreement, that here, you know, I'd like to make a deal with this guy.
Protests last time round, you know, there may be protests. Do you think the protests are perhaps going to be slightly pumped up because of this endorsement of Boris Johnson?
It makes it more complicated. It makes it more Remainer. One of my frustrations of Trump mucking in here is that I've constantly tried to make a distinction between the Trump phenomenon and the Brexit phenomenon. I think you can make a perfectly liberal case for leaving the EU. And in fact, I do think that it's a natural American position because I don't think most Americans would ever join an organization anything like the EU. But that doesn't mean that the Trump phenomenon and the Brexit are they're not one and the same. And I think that that comparison is always to the detriment of Brexit.
Thank you all very much indeed.